The Horizon 2 grant is officially underway, and Rudy Raceline has called the partners together at his northern Missouri farm to discuss next steps and to tour his working example of what row crop agriculture may look like in the future. We begin this episode sitting down with Rudy to discuss his long-term vision for Horizon 2 and the reward of this dream becoming a reality. Then on an Indian summer day in October, we return to the prairie we burned earlier in the year to witness seed collection by hand. The response to the fire is remarkable. Out here in the heartland, where agriculture drives rural economy, we are on the path to a future that not only produces food, but also renewable energy, ecological services, and improved wildlife habitats. I'm on a journey to tell the stories of Horizon 2, a climate-smart future for corn, soybean, livestock, and renewable natural gas production. I'm Brandon Butler, and this is Prairie Prophets. It's early October, and we've returned to Raceline Farms in North Missouri. The Horizon 2 Climate Smart Commodities Grant is final. It's been signed, and Rudy has called the partners together at his farm to discuss what we're going to do to begin implementation. Today, we have conservation and wildlife professionals from across Iowa and Missouri coming together to begin working on outcomes and implementation practices. We're going to celebrate the culmination of the journey to get us to this point, but now the work really begins. Let's go catch up with Rudi Roeslein. Rudy, tell us about the meeting we're having at your farm today.
Yeah, well, we have this, unique opportunity with the USDA grant that we have to really try to put some prairie back on the landscape. We convinced Tom Vilsack and the USDA to give us an $80 million grant for our Horizon 2 vision, which is, all about how do we put millions and millions of acres of prairie back on a landscape without having more than just, altruistic value. And what we've been trying to establish is, what is the value to society? And is there a market that can place some value? That market being now the renewable natural gas market. Also, there's a carbon market. I think there ought to be a water purification market. I think there ought to be a soil health market. And so if we can combine that with the value for wildlife, I think people will start to understand that putting millions of acres of prairie back on the landscape has tremendous value to society. We're completely focused right now on atmospheric conditions, but we really need to understand how precious water is. I mean, less than 3% of our water in the world now is potable. It's a crisis everywhere. It's starting to be a crisis in the Ogallala, it's a crisis in Africa, it's a crisis all over the world. And so having clean water, instead of spending billions of dollars on our water purification systems at all these municipalities, can be handled by the value that prairie has.
The Horizon 2 grant, which stems from your vision, is going to create a greater demand for native seed supply than we've seen probably ever. Where is that seed going to come from?
But that gets into this question, what do we plant? I've been trying to answer that question for 20 years. I've actually engaged some professors for a couple of years in Midwestern Biomass Alliance group that I formed and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to help answer that question. And we made significant progress because the question is complex. The other components are, how do we get the ecological value? And our prairies used to have 400 species. Well, we can't afford 400 species. They're not even available. And so then the question asks, again, what do you plant? And then what do our wildlife really need? What's best for our wildlife? I've planted, 2.5 years ago, I planted 76 species on 90 acres out here at $1,000 an acre. We can't afford to do that with this grant. We have a budget. And so we're trying to get within that budget with as many species as we possibly can. My vision and concept is that we need as many flowering species throughout the entire season to help with pollinators, but we also need deep roots that help, sequester carbon and actually keep that carbon in the soil long term.
In episode 5, we burned a prairie under the watchful eye of Frank Oberle. Now we are back to watch seed harvest from the plants that exploded from the scorched landscape. Justin, back in episode 7 of Prairie Prophets, we were here on this piece of property while you were conducting a prescribed fire. Now we're back while you guys are harvesting the seed from the plants that regrew after that fire. Can you talk about the annual life cycle of a prairie?
So prairie is an amazing thing. In my experience, we typically burn anywhere from March to May, and the plants start to regrow from that point, and we typically start harvesting seed mid-June, late July, somewhere in there. And that harvest season will end sometime early November, and we do what we can to hand harvest as much good seed as we can, and make sure we keep any invasive species out of there. So it's a tedious process, but it's how it's got to be done.
Yeah, we don't see any tractors or combines out here. When you say hand harvest, I mean you're actually going through plant by plant, picking the seeds off of.
Right. A majority of the species we do hand harvest just to make sure that quality is there, and we keep any invasive species out. You get into a monoculture field, solid stand, and we'll use mechanical features to harvest, such as a combine or a flail vac, but those stands are few and far between, so hand harvest a lot of the times is the only option.
When you come to harvest, do you focus on one species at a time so you're not mixing the seed together?
Right, and with the crew that we got, we want them to form a tunnel vision, pick more seed faster. They're focused on one species at a time. We'll go through a field and clean it out and come back and hit the next species.
Now, when we left here last spring, this was scorched earth, and it's turned back into this beautiful prairie. How do you feel it responded from the fire?
I think it responded very well. It's vibrant. There's many species that flourished from a May burn here, and I think the results speak for themselves.
What are some of the more popular plants that you're finding out here?
This year was a bumper crop year for compass plant, prairie dock, common milkweed, prairie blazing star. So those hardy perennial species, they did very well this year.
What's going to happen with this seed?
This seed will be used for the Horizon 2 grant to plant all these acres back into prairie on the landscape.
So we're going to actually take from a prairie that's already established and be able to restore more lands back to prairie.
Absolutely.
That's got to make you happy.
Yeah, it's fun to get seed from northern Missouri and southern Iowa and put it right back into the soil and put more prairie on the ground.
It's refreshing to see seeds being harvested by hand, as they were thousands of years ago. Reaping to sow the future. It's not easy work, but it is as worthy as efforts can be. The Raceline Farm is our working example of Horizon 2. Here you see where agriculture transitions to prairie. As this cornfield, which is prime agricultural acres, transitions to this hillside, if we were trying to farm this hillside, we could expect real erosion problems. But by keeping agriculture where it belongs, on our prime acres, and putting prairie, which will now be an economic commodity, on this hillside, we're actually keeping our crops where they belong and coming up with a solution to not only create profit, but to protect our soil and keep it where it belongs without being eroded into our rivers and streams. The ecological and wildlife benefits are many, but that is really the key, is keeping prairie where it belongs on our marginal lands and keeping agriculture where it belongs on our prime acres.
How do you see this being a collaborative effort amongst all the partners of the Horizon 2 grant?
What we've asked is a number of groups to come, the Nature Conservancy, Quail Pheasants Forever, our Conservation Department will be represented here, U.S. Fish and Wildlife will be represented, and then of course, both the Iowa and the Missouri directors of the Conservation Federations of Iowa and Missouri. And we've asked a number of other organizations to participate because I want to be collaborative. I want to help answer that question. I don't want this grant to turn into some unintended consequences that I'm not smart enough to figure out. So I'm hoping the meeting today is the beginning of that process. The other constraint is what's available. And so, I've commissioned, and because the grant and getting funds from the grant takes time, our first 1,000 acres need to be planted in January. And so I commissioned some local seed producers to pick critical seed that's available and ready now. What happens is if we have a 30, 40 mile an hour wind today and tomorrow, a lot of those seeds are going to be dispersed. So I authorized them 2 weeks ago to start picking seed. I advanced $100,000 for that process to make sure that we have the seed available, because all of this is going to depend on, it's great if we come up with this formula, but if we can't get the seed or if it's too expensive, then all of it is just another academic study.
Collaboration is the key to the success of Horizon 2. The partners are gathering as we should, in a barn on Rudy's farm where this journey began.
I'm Rudy Raceline. I kind of embarked on this a long time ago. My passion's always been wildlife. After spending a couple years on the board with the Missouri Prairie Foundation, I just really got an appreciation for what prairie can bring. But the question is, how does a farmer get remunerated? And so when the opportunity for anaerobic digestion came up, I kind of started thinking about, is there a way to have a market-based return? Kind of embarked on this vision of saying, well, what if we restored 30 million acres along our streams and rivers and waterways? So that set me on this goal. It's about gas production and it's about ecological services. But the question that I think I want to pose to all of us, this is a wonderful opportunity, and at 75, I don't want to look back and say I had these unintended consequences and I didn't choose the right materials. So what we plant, where we plant it, how we plant it, and when we harvest it are the things that I think I want to collaborate the most on. I've used this farm, and these guys have been working for me for quite a while. I bought this farm in 2008. It was 1,000 acres. It's up to 2,000. I've kind of used it as my blueprint and my model. I've surrounded my streams and my lakes and my creeks and my waterways with prairie. I've taken out any of the farmland that was previously farmed, which was considerable, that was less than break even, I put it back into prairie. I did it without any subsidies from the government, other than the 200 acres I did with Fish and Wildlife, the National Wild Turkey Federation, and MDC. But the balance of it is all things that I've done here, and I kind of want to use it as a blueprint. I'd like to take a quick tour, if we can, after we have some of these discussions, to show you some thoughts. Really, the reason I want to get everybody together is we all have interests in supporting wildlife and supporting environmental services. The more biomass I make, the more gas I make, but the thicker it gets, the less value it has for wildlife. So trying to find that magic nexus of all those things is what I'm hoping we can collaborate on.
I'm here today to be able to learn, to listen, and to be more knowledgeable as I go back to my members at the organization that I run. It's certainly important to be able to understand everybody's mission and passion, and we're so different and diverse, but yet we all have common goals. So I'm really hoping to learn and educate and learn and be educated today on so many different facets of all the great things that Rudy's been able to accomplish.
I was invited down to participate in a discussion about how wildlife would be impacted by the Horizon 2 project. I have several board members that are involved in one way or the other with slightly different agendas, each one of them, and we're looking at how to integrate prairie and wildlife and agriculture together in a way that's going to be sustainable, and sustainability basically for generations to come.
So we're here today to meet with lots of folks from conservation. What we're trying to do is we're trying to achieve multiple outcomes. We're trying to achieve wildlife habitat benefits, we're trying to achieve energy production, and we're also trying to achieve conservation and ecological system benefits. So we have a need for collaboration because we have multiple objectives, we have multiple outcomes that we're looking for, and so that's what we're here today to do, is talk about how do we work together to achieve those outcomes.
Just a few weeks ago, this sea of brown was full of vibrant colors. As this prairie goes dormant for the winter, it still provides numerous ecological and wildlife benefits. It's keeping our soil where it needs to be, right here on the ground, stopping erosion, but also providing habitat for white-tailed deer, pheasants, quail, and so many other species that make their home in these native grasses. We have long understood the conservation benefits of prairie. What the Horizon 2 grant is going to provide is a revolutionary look at how prairie can become valuable as a feedstock to make renewable energy. As Horizon 2 develops and we harvest prairie sustainably and add it to our digesters to make renewable natural gas, we'll bring a value to this landscape that it's never known before. Prairie is one of the most impoverished ecosystems we have across the country, but especially here in the Midwest. So to bring new value to prairie is a real key to the Horizon 2 initiative. And I'm excited to see how our conservation and wildlife partners respond to the tour today.
This was planted in 2010. I'm real happy with the level of density here. It doesn't seem too thick.
Watched around where I live, there's a lot of prairie left. I mean, lots. Prairie next to me, you could combine the seed from what they baled hay off of. If you hay the ground or you take forage off of it too low, it takes so long for it to rebound.
Maybe the organic matter content, the soil health, let's call it. So if you have a darker, richer soil, it might regrow sooner and faster, and you might have different cutting.
You have to have.
I've got a tremendous root system now that helps all of this. But what's really important is that all of that, almost to where it started to come down the hill, used to be in croplands. So we put all of that, as you came down, All of this has been put into Prairie.
You often talk to us, your employees, about how God draws straight lines and crooked paths. When you started this crooked path, some people asked, has Rudy lost his mind? What is Rudy trying to do? He's gonna turn manure into energy? How rewarding is it for you now to be at a place where we've received this grant and your vision has been acknowledged and we're actually putting it into place?
Well, I think I'd be lying if I didn't say it's somewhat of a validation. And so this crooked path, I mean, I walked through the valley of death for almost 7 years before we made any money at all. And we're not finished, you know. I mean, this is just the beginning. So it's a great validation, but it's also at 75, it's somewhat of a burden to me. And thinking about, you know, can I see it through? Will I live to be 80 to actually see this? So I've surrounded myself with a whole bunch of people like you and Brian that hopefully will carry on this vision and dream and inspire them to believe that this really has value.
Through the Horizon 2 grant, we're going to explore how the ecological and wildlife benefits of Prairie are so important, but we're also going to transition Prairie into a commodity that can be used to create a renewable energy source.
The discussions this tour fostered were exactly what Rudy was hoping to achieve. His army of Prairie prophets is growing, and the excitement and opportunity generated by the Horizon 2 grant gives us a path forward to the more sustainable future he has long dreamed of.